My loneliness is killing me.
Juliet plunges Romeo's dagger into her heart.
What if Juliet didn't die? That should almost be the start of the play.
Hit me, baby, one more time.
Hello, I'm Patrick Pacheco. Welcome to this episode of Theater All the Moving Parts about And Juliet, the new musical hit that rewrites one of Shakespeare's greatest tragedies into a feminist musical comedy farce. We speak with Stark Sands and Betsy Wolfe, who spar as Will Shakespeare and his long-suffering wife, Anne Hathaway, as well as Paolo Schott and Melanie LeBerry as a pair of unexpected lovers. Then the musical supervisor, Bill Sherman, tells us how he seamlessly weaves into the show 30 songs from the hit maker Max Martin. First, let's meet Stark Sands, Betsy Wolfe, Melanie LeBerry, and Paolo Schott. Welcome to you all, and I am delighted to be among you preternaturally beautiful people in this very, very fun show. I suppose I should start by saying that And Juliet was written by David West Reed, who wrote, obviously, Schitt's Creek. So it's filled with a lot of very clever humor. What was your impression when you first read the script? Let's start with you, Betsy.
I read the script on October 29th, 2021, and I was one of the few scripts that I can actually say was one of those where I could visually see what was going to happen, and I was laughing audibly out loud. And not many scripts, you'll do kind of a silent chuckle, but I was just profoundly overwhelmed by how there could be this like wit and comedy, but then also this really, really touching, beautiful story, and somehow it all worked together. So it's kind of a unicorn in that sense.
Melanie.
I couldn't tell you the exact date because it was like 5 years ago or something like that. So the first
You've been in it from the beginning.
Yes, so I was in it. They had done previous workshops in the US. So they'd done about 2 workshops in the US, and I was with it in the winter of 2017, which is when they did the first workshop of it in the UK. And like Betsy, it was one of those things. Luke Shepard, he said to me, come and read something for me. I can't tell you what it is.
Luke was the director.
Luke is the director. And he said, come and read this. I can't tell you. And then I went and we read this thing. And I was screaming, screaming out, which is my want anyway. I was screaming out with laughter. But also, there are things in the script that have not changed. And there is a beautiful moment at the end of the show that Betsy and Stark do. And that has not changed. That speech had, and I was weeping because it is the most beautiful bit of text, I think, ever said by a woman on stage.
Paolo.
Well, I was working here in New York when my agent called me and said, I have a text for you to read. And I was doing Chicago at that time. And I said, I'm so tired. I don't have the time to do this. And I started to read before going to bed, and I couldn't sleep. I wanted to read the whole thing because, as you said, I started to cry, started to laugh. And I started to imagine how important it would be for me to be able to tell that story of this father and who has a son who is struggling with many things in his life. So I absolutely fell in love with this script.
And I suppose we should say, for the sake of the viewers, that And Juliet is about when Anne Hathaway, the much aggrieved Anne Hathaway, wife of Will Shakespeare, decides that she's going to have a hand in writing or rewriting Romeo and Juliet, and decides that Juliet is suddenly going to take a little charge of her life and live.
I got the eye of the tiger, dancing through the fire. I am a champion, and you're gonna hear me roar.
And then has the adventures having.
Yeah, she has a couple thoughts for her hubby.
And as her hubby, you, Will Shakespeare, Stark Sands, what did you think of the script? And I suppose we should say, what did you think about playing William Shakespeare?
Well, it was intimidating. I this came to me very late in the process. There was maybe a few weeks before rehearsals started for this production on its way to Toronto. And I had just gotten home from an out-of-town run away from my family, and there was no world in which I was going to do another out-of-town run, but I read it. And I just went, oh no. So I took it to my wife. She read it. We listened to the soundtrack, and she looked at me and she said, you have to do this. You have to do this. It's worth the sacrifice. I was intimidated at the idea of playing William Shakespeare on a Broadway stage or any stage, but the way that this show interprets him is not literal. It's a pop star, bit of an egotist, but still somehow charming, and written very funny. And that was the thing that intimidated me the most, because I haven't been given a chance to do that on a stage, really, like for a whole show. I have funny moments and things that I've done, but no one's asked me to be in a comedy, in like the heavy lifting part. And I believe in doing things that scare you. And so I said yes, and here we are, and it seems to be working.
Betsy, as Anne Hathaway, at one point you say to him, keep it light, keep it tight, keep it fun, and then we're done.
Yes.
Why? Why? You think he's too heavy of a playwright?
Well, I think that night, also one of my first couple lines too is, I'm here, I got a babysitter, I'm gonna have a large glass of wine and watch your play, I'm gonna leave you alone. And then we know that that's obviously not what it is, but I think that their relationship is just so beautiful in this show, and I think that we see her gaining agency, and the fact that she shows up and says, tonight's the night I think things are gonna change for us. And I think that that's so unexpected for an audience. We know nothing about Anne Hathaway. I mean, you're going through all the books, like we know so little about her in real life. And so maybe it's just this little portal into, I want an equal say in this partnership. Let's do this together. We're gonna be done. We can make it through this. And that maybe speaks to like the bigger part of their relationship as well.
Why does Shakespeare acquiesce to that request from Anne Hathaway?
That's a great question. I think because he's put on the spot, and I think because at the moment when she says, let's do it, the group, my group of players all look at me and say, come on. And so I think at the beginning when he says, all right, what would happen in your play? It's not necessarily a yes. It's like, all right, well, tell me what you're thinking. And her first idea is a good one. And
which is,
well, Romeo can still die, that's fine. But what about, when do you say the line for us?
Oh gosh, now I'm like out of body. Well, Romeo can still die, that's fine. But what I really want to see is Juliet wake up and decide to just move on. And so, yeah.
So that when she says that, there's a moment, I don't have a line, but I have a facial expression where I think, oh, that's not so bad. And so it's just the first step in the process together. And the more she writes and we write together, the better it is, until she accuses me, accuses the play of being too simple. And that's when I think, oh no, well, that's not my brand. It cannot be simple, that's death. So I'm gonna take it back.
and there's brinkmanship in there as well, as there are in all good sparring couples.
Yeah.
Melanie, you get, as the nurse, you get a name, Angelique. We never know the nurse's name in Romeo and Juliet.
Actually, we do.
Oh, we do? Okay.
Because in Act 4, Scene 4 of Romeo and Juliet, Lady Capulet refers to sweet Angelica. So the name is actually there. And I love that David West Reed has plucked it out and put it in, of course, with a French twist, because we do go to Paris. And so this is why she's called Angelique. Yes!
There, see, I stand corrected. But the nurse in Romeo and Juliet doesn't get a love life or a sex life, thanks to Paolo. I mean, excuse me.
Paolo.
Thanks to Lance. Excuse me, Paolo. Don't want to bring in your personal life here.
Okay.
But that must have been part of the delight of playing her, having a love life and being a full-bodied character with that lovely lilt of a Caribbean accent.
Yes. It's so many things. It was part of it because she does get to explore her own agency as well. Because in Romeo and Juliet, she is just an adjunct to Juliet and what Juliet wants, and to facilitate Juliet's desires in the play. She does do that quite reluctantly because now Juliet wants to go on an adventure with all her best friends, and now she has to come along because, oh my gosh, but she gets to have her own adventures as well. But in terms of her whole arc, that didn't come until much, much later. So I do this big proposal speech, I Want, in the second half of the play. And that didn't come until 2019.
Oh.
3 weeks into rehearsals, when David West Reed said, you know what, after, since you've been gone, we don't really hear from the nurse until, after, the wedding. And I really want to know what she wants. And he came and he brought this long old speech for me. And we sat down on a mat, on an exercise mat, and he said, could you just read this for me? And I read it in exactly the same way that I say it now. Because I looked at it and I said, this is not a woman who's used to asking for what she wants.
Uh-huh.
So she has to just say it. And I always say, I describe it as, I say the speech like if I'm running towards the edge of a cliff and then I just jump off. And I don't know if anybody's going to catch me. And luckily, he does.
Well, what's fascinating, Paolo, is that obviously you have created beautiful, beautiful characters in opera and on Broadway, of course. Did you ever think in your entire career that you would be singing a song made famous by Britney Spears?
No, never. Never. I never thought of it. But at the moment when I read the song list, I said, I want to do these songs because, as you said, we are moved by challenges, I think. And I was never comfortable doing a thing that I started to think, I know this genre, I know how to do this. I always wanted to do. It's the same thing when it happens with South Pacific. I was doing operas for 20 years, and when this opportunity came on my life, I said, I want to do this. And in this case, it was the same thing. Although it's a musical, but it's a slight different, singing different songs, but I'm having a great, great time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you do sing Teenage Dream. It's a duet
Yes.
between the two of you.
Make me feel like I'm living a teenage dream. The way you turn me on, I can't sleep. Let's run away and don't ever look back. Don't ever look back.
That's one of the clever placements of a song. I would never have thought that a couple of a higher age than you two would be singing Teenage Dream. Was that always placed where it was?
Yes,
Always
absolutely.
placed where it
Always.
was?
That Teenage Dream Break Free mashup, because it's
Yes.
two songs that happened at that time. It was always there, always at that point in the show. And because it is about their nostalgia. And that's the thing, it's a nostalgic song. It's about remembering the life that we once had. And so while we do a lot of funny things and a lot of funny choreography, at the heart of it is just a beat of nostalgia, a beat of looking back and remembering that young love.
Now, I think almost all of you, if not all of you, have sung on Broadway and in the quote-unquote Broadway sound or Broadway
No.
style. You haven't.
This is my Broadway debut.
Congratulations. Well, you sound fantastic, of course. But for those who have sung on Broadway, did it take a great deal of adaptation to perhaps relearn, reorient yourself to the pop idiom of Max Martin?
I
When
can
we start with you,
start.
Stone?
My answer is easy. I only get cast in pop modern songs, musicals. So I did Green Day's American Idiot. I did Kinky Boots, written by Cyndi Lauper, and now this. So
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm going to be cast in a more traditional, like legit musical. And this is sort of where I find myself, and I'm happy. I feel comfortable in this.
And that was good preparation for you, singing Cyndi Lauper and everybody.
And I had a
Green Day.
band in high school, and it's like that's just the music that I tend to gravitate towards.
What about you, Betsy? Was it an adjustment?
So growing up, I thought I wanted to be an opera singer, so I trained classically. I listened to Cecilia Bartoli. And then my other favorite artists were Celine Dion and Mariah Carey. So
Wow.
to be fair, what's funny is, and I never wanted to pick, so I've done, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, and then the last 5 years, more classic stuff, Sondheim. and then contemporary stuff as well. So for me, it wasn't about so much changing my voice, because this is, I sing how I sing. I lean into a certain style a little bit more, but because I grew up listening to so many of these pop artists, I think that there's something just that's in there. You maybe tone down the vibrato a little bit here and there, but what surprised me about the Max Martin catalog was I would never assume that if you looked at the pop songs as almost like a monologue, that they actually said lyrics that meant something, that told a story. But what is shocking is if you didn't know these songs, and when I was reading the script that one day, I didn't know actually a couple of the newer songs, and I would have thought they were written for the show as like almost like a musical theater song, because they read so much like a story song and take us genuinely from one place to the next, which isn't necessarily reflective of all pop songs, dare I say that, but they're really, really clever lyrics.
Well, what's fascinating and is that, of course, you get the great Celine Dion song. That's the way it is. How did you make it your own?
When you want it the most, there's no easy way out. When you're ready to go. When you want it the most, there's no easy way out. When you're ready to go and your heart's left in doubt, don't give up on your faith. Love comes to those who believe it, and that's the way it is.
I've listened to Celine Dion my whole life. So, Linda Eder I've listened to my whole life. There's something about this sound that I love that I'm sure is part of me. But I didn't also have to try to necessarily say, how do I not make it her version? If I stick true to the text and I put myself really in the scene of myself in a room, finally saying what I would have wanted to say to my younger self, to Juliet, honestly, it just comes naturally. I think there's that you get caught up when you're saying, like, I don't want to do it like this, because that's, if you actually just stay true to the text and the story, it just is going to come out how it comes out.
You mentioned, Melanie, earlier, of course, your soliloquy, Angelique's soliloquy, which ends with what you want. And what you want is to ask Lance to marry you. Why was it important for you to ask him to marry you rather than the other way around?
We have this great game that we play because it's really about him and about his lack of ability to really say what he means. So in the teenage dream scene, and so that's where everything starts. And this is what's great about David West Reid, because what you really want to say, the seed of it is planted a long time. Stark has a great joke that he tells in the second half, where the actual setup of it is in the first half, which is still my favorite joke today. So, but that's an aside.
Should we go to the joke first and then that?
No, I don't want to give it away. I'm never going to give it away, but it is my favorite.
All right.
But it's because we have this thing in Teenage Dream where obviously we've spent the night together and he can't ever say what he means. So he comes and he says things like, you were the best nurse we ever had after we spent the night together, and so he wants to say, I'm so happy to see you, but he can't actually say those words. And even when we come into the soliloquy scene, he says, I say, now since we're already here, perhaps a second marriage might be arranged. So he can't say what he means. And I know he loves me. And so that's what it is. It's really, that's what I want. I want him to tell me what he really means. What does he want from me? This is what I want. I want to know if that's the same as what you want, or are you going to carry on for the rest of our lives just fluttering around the edges, never telling me how much you care about me? And so that's why it's really important. It's my favorite bit of text that has ever come out of my mouth. It's so delicious, and it's so delicious to watch you just stand there.
It's the first transformation that Lance has in this whole arc of his character is this moment where the person that he loves puts him against the wall and forces him to look not to himself but to other people around. So the nurse Angelique forces him to see that the world doesn't revolve just around him, and because he's this kind of guy. When we first meet him, he only thinks of his traditions and his way of leading lives and educating his sons. And that's the first moment that I truly feel that Lance is transforming himself into a different man.
And a better father as well. We should say, obviously, that your dynamic, of course, is a father that wants his son
Absolutely.
to marry.
To follow all my rules, yes,
Right.
as the previous sons, or you get married or you go to the army. There is no another option, and he truly doesn't understand why it is not working with Francois. So it's really complicated for him too. He doesn't know what else to do to get his son to get married.
And how is it that Lance is able to come around to who Francois finally falls in love with, which is a gender non-binary or non-binary gender-identifying individual? How is it that, in your mind, he comes around to that tolerant point of view?
When I first read that scene, I was going through something very personal in my circle of family. A very similar case of a father and a young boy in my family going through the same process. And I thought this is a great moment to still tell that story to so many dads that are still out there not wanting to see their kids for what they are or for what they need. And it is very, for a traditionalist like Lance is, it's very hard to accept. He tries not to accept for as long as he can, but there's a moment when he starts to see that he accepts his son for what he is, or he's gonna lose his son. And that's unbearable. And that's, I think, what transforms him and makes him to I wouldn't say to give up on his traditional ways of thinking.
That's one of the things that both Betsy and you, Melanie, said earlier, is that it's lots of fun and very witty and very clever, but there are also these questions that it's asking in these ways that I think make it far more palatable for people to receive, because you just discussed something that I think a lot of parents are now going through, and it's much more fun to see this message delivered in this way.
And since we started the run in Toronto, I have received some messages from boys saying, I took my parents to see the show because I thought it was a great way of telling them who I am.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's really lovely. And of course, a great deal of this is about women's empowerment in the world of Shakespeare. And I think one of your lines, Betsy, is, are you strong enough to write a stronger woman?
Yeah, there's an undercurrent. Mel was speaking to it. She said when she finally said, she's never said what she's wanted before, and she's finally saying it. In the first scene, I say to William Shakespeare, I've never asked before. I'll never ask again. And I think there's this theme of what if we actually said what we wanted? What if today was the day we decided to say to our loved ones, to friends, the things that we need to say the most? The things that would reveal something about ourselves, that would make this better. Today's the day that I want this to change and be more authentic. And we see that portrayed in all of these relationships. And it's definitely the women, in this moment in time that show up and say, it's going to be different today. And then we even see Juliet and Romeo have that moment, spoiler alert, when he says, I wish that we could have done this. And she says, you literally rose from the dead. Your life can be anything you want. So there's this idea that a second chance can happen for all of us. And I think that's why also the show resonates so well right now, is it's not just we've, kind of coming out of COVID and we're all here, but it actually makes you feel like the audience, you might leave the theater going, what can I do? What can I change today?
Why do you suppose what you just said is so difficult for people to say, which you've said, which is, what do you want from me? Why do you think it's so difficult for people to articulate that to
Because it
others?
requires courage. And it requires a particular type of courage. And we are courageous. Human beings are courageous in so many ways. Sometimes as we look at life around us now, and we're still in the throes of a pandemic that stopped the world for such a long time, that made us have to stand up and look at issues that we kind of, put in our blinkers, behind our blinkers for a long time, And so we're starting to find our courage. Mothers and fathers have to be courageous every day when they send their children to school and not know where they are for certain hours of the day. Partners have to be courageous when they decide to spend lives with other people, and hope that they love them and that they're true to them. We have so many acts of courage that we do.
Well said. There's this central question, which I'd like to address to all of you for anybody that wants to come up with it, and that is something that has puzzled Shakespearean scholars a long time. Why on earth did Will Shakespeare leave in his will only the second best bed to his long-suffering and devoted and loyal wife?
Yes, why?
Well, I want to start by saying that there is no universal agreement on this.
No.
But one interpretation that I think works for me in the context of this show is that back then, in the early 1600s, the marriage bed was one bed. The guest bed was the best bed.
Right.
That's the one that they kept it as good as possible, so when they had guests, they slept in the best bed. So the second best bed was their bed. It was the sentimental bed that they shared together when he was home, which wasn't very much. But that is one interpretation of why that's what she got. Because the best bed had no meaning to them.
That's what you're going with?
That's what
I like it.
in that moment.
No, I like it. I like it.
Because go ahead.
No, it's great because it's so great because I then love what David West Reed has done, and he's made this kind of modern day interpretation of second best and used that to great effect when we have kind of, maybe apocryphally this understanding of what the second best bed was. But I love that dichotomy of the language.
Yes, that's a beautiful explanation, Stark.
And it actually probably is quite accurate, I think.
Wow.
And it's probably the answer to the question that I wanted to ask Betsy as Anne Hathaway when she says, well, you wrote Romeo in your own image, and Romeo's a douche. So do you still think that Romeo's a douche?
I think that we all
And Will's a douche by proxy.
well, and very quickly after that, though, the tables change. I think we all have elements, right? We all have essences of ourselves when we are at our worst and when we are at our best. And I think that those things are balanced out when we do find the humans that make us better and challenge us and humble us. And I think that this whole show for them is realizing that there needs to be more of a balance of that, and that Romeo might have been in his, the unbalanced state, but that if we actually work together, which is something I say, and we are the partners that I know that we can be, we can get on the same plane.
At one point, you break his quill in two. You break his quill in two. Is there something Freudian going on there?
Well, not to spoiler alert, but it is a very powerful moment when she decides to take the one thing that she knows is probably the most important thing to him and say, no more. Good luck.
And then something else happens with the quill. And I don't know if we want to give it away, but it's a lovely moment.
The scene that leads to the quill snap is one where she gives him an ultimatum, and basically says, "Who do you really love more? Do your work or your family?" And he doesn't give her, and he can't choose. And so he says, "I love both. I care very much about both." And so I think the quill represents his career and his life in that world, and by snapping it, it's sort of forcing his hand.
We have a couple of minutes left, so I'd like to end our wonderful conversation by just simply asking you, what's your favorite song to sing in the show and why? Why don't we start with
Oh, Shape of My Heart. Because, in my case, it's the song that really transforms this relationship with father and son. And many times it's really hard not to start crying because it's a very powerful moment. And I have a great partner, Philippe Arroyos, who is doing Francois. And we are building every day this relationship of father and son. And it's very curious because it never ends.
Now let me show you the shape of my heart. Show you the shape of my heart.
It's not a relationship that you say, no, I get this relationship. No, it changes. And that's the beauty of theater. You know, once you know, you think you know something, the other day is completely different. So that is the moment that I can be really truthful, and it does something to my heart and my soul.
Wonderful. Melanie?
Teenage Dream Break Free is right up there with the things that I really love doing. And I will remember that he did not say that tonight when we're on stage. I will remember that he did not say that his favorite, I'm going to remember you. But actually, my favorite thing to sing is Perfect when I'm on stage with Laura.
Yes. I'm glad you said the last part of that song.
Yes,
title.
Absolutely. I know how to behave when I'm in public with polite people. Yes, it is my favorite thing because it is the culmination of all of our fears not realized and all of our courage that comes to bear. And for all of us and everything that we go through in this show, we are all absolutely perfect where we stand.
Pretty, pretty please, if you ever feel like you're nothing, you're imperfect to me.
That's it.
There's many songs that I enjoy singing, of course, but one that I think brings so much joy is it's the song that we actually start out with, I Want It That Way.
You are my fire, the one desire. Believe when I say I want it that way. But
it sets up for me their relationship and saying, this is going to be different tonight, sweetie. Tonight, it's going to change. And it's also the first moment in the show where the audiences realize, oh my gosh, they're going to do this with songs all night. We are so there. We're ready for it. We're going to set up a certain song that you think the way you know it makes no sense maybe even in the original version, but then all of a sudden you turn it into a duet and it makes perfect sense. It's a conversation song. And then the fact that it circles back at the end of the show, that we see that again and we see that theme come back and we've learned something along the way. It's tongue-in-cheek and yet it's heartfelt. And, it's with the best scene partners. What are you going to do?
It's great.
Yeah.
Stark.
I love all the songs that I get to sing with Betsy, and one of them is the last song in the show, which is called Can't Stop the Feeling.
got this feeling in my body. Can't stop the feeling. Got this feeling in my body. I can't stop the feeling. Wanna see you move your body. Got this feeling in my body. Come on.
It takes the place of the traditional jig from Shakespearean times, which at the end of every play, not just Shakespeare's, but all of the plays of that era, when it was over and everybody was dead on stage, they would all stand up and do a dance together and do a jig and sing a song. And that's our jig, right? And back then it was to show the audience we're alive, this wasn't real, and we love each other and everything's okay, so they wouldn't get stabbed walking down the street later that day. But for us, it's our chance to look at the audience again and look at them and smile at them and say, join us, and they do. And it's so wonderful to have that true shared moment where we're all singing a song and dancing at the same time as our audience.
Well, thank you for sharing it with the public at large, and thank you for sharing it today. Thank you all. We are taking a short break. When we return, musical supervisor Bill Sherman explains how he managed to reinvent the massively popular hit songs of Max Martin into a buoyantly theatrical score for & Juliet. Welcome back. I'm Patrick Pacheco. I am now joined by Bill Sherman, who won a Tony Award for his orchestrations for Lin-Manuel Miranda's In the Heights and a Grammy Award for the Hamilton album, which he followed up as musical director of Freestyle Love Supreme. His latest challenge was the magic trick of taking hit songs by the likes of Katy Perry and Britney Spears, and poof, making them live in an Elizabethan world of romantic folly. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. It's an honor.
It's good to be with you. You've stated in interviews that when you heard about the idea, you thought it was the dumbest thing you'd ever heard, and then quickly agreed. Why?
It's a great question, and I'm not sure why I say that all the time. But I think finding a way to take a number of pop songs that are in no way related and sort of, forming them into some cohesive ideas just sounds like a crazy idea. And they're from all different times of your life and all different genres, and all different artists have sing them, and they're very important in their own essence as singles, as single things. And so the idea of sort of mushing them all together in a musical just sounds crazy to me. Like, why would you ever want to do that? And then as we got further and further along in the process of & Juliet, it became very clear that it was like, oh, you can do this in like a very artistic, insightful way, and it can be very creative and interesting, and it actually does make all of those songs somehow work in a cohesive way. And I guess I should stop saying that.
Can you describe the process? Obviously, you join with David West Reed, the book writer, and Luke the Shepherd, the director, in terms of cohesively and seamlessly marrying this pop world to Broadway, to a Broadway musical. Can you describe the process? Obviously, again, with Max Martin, who created and co-wrote or produced all these songs.
Sure. I think the process initially was I got hired. David had written a preliminary script, so they had given him sort of like Max Martin's entire catalog to make a musical out of. And David sort of figured out ways to make jokes and tell a story with all of these songs, or with the songs that he picked. Some 30 songs, I believe, are in the show. And then I came along, and I remember in the early days, David would always ask me, like, would this work? Meaning, if we could take a song from this person and a song from this person and squish them into one song because that would work better for our thing, could that happen? And my answer in the beginning and to this day is always like, sure. I had no idea if it could work, but I always would say, yes, absolutely, of course it can. Maybe that's like my early training in like, improv, like yes and, right? So I would always just be like, yes, of course it can. And so we would go along like that. So it was like, can we take Ariana Grande's Problem and The Weeknd's I Can't Feel My Face, and can they have like a medley and do a thing? And I'd be like, okay, sure. I had no idea. I would always, and so because I didn't want to tell him no, because I didn't want the process to stop. So we'd work like that, and we would have readings, and then we didn't have a director for a long time, so there was like no direction, and so we hired Luke Shepherd, and he came along and definitely started to sculpt this giant mound of clay that David had created, and then really making the narrative be the central focus, and figuring out how we could make these 30 pop songs really tell a story, not just like kind of tell a story, and not just like shoehorned into a particular place where it like kind of works and kind of doesn't. It was like we tried to make every moment count as much as possible, like you do when you always make a musical. And Max's role, other than writing, the greatest pop songs of the past 25 years, no big deal, was he was so very hands-off in the beginning. He wanted us to just be like, he sort of gave us these songs and he said, look, if they're gonna be like the originals, make them really like the originals. And if they're gonna be not, then go totally in the direction, but like take chances and you're not gonna offend me. And so before I really got hired, they made me sort of like put on these mini concerts where I would like hire a bunch of people and rearrange some of the songs and like play them for Max. Like that was my job. I was sort of earning my stripes. And we did that like 3 times, I think. And we brought along who is now our music director, who's also one of our orchestrators, this guy named Dominic Follicaro, who's very new to the theater scene. He's more of a pop guy. And my idea with that was like, let's bring in somebody who has never done this before, has a totally fresh take on it, and see how he can sort of manipulate this world and how he and I can work off each other and Max to sort of make this all like glob of music happen. And so the only time that it ever went poorly is we did a version of Show Me the Meaning of Being Lonely that Max did not like. And you could see it on his face. Now that we've been friends for about 10 years at this point, like I can tell when he doesn't like something. And so like he would just kind of be like this. And then he said the only negative thing and I can't even believe I'm talking about this. The only thing he ever told me that I did wrong was he said, it sounds like a thesis project, like not, it sounds like you were thinking too hard, right? It's like it's pop music, like stop thinking, right? So anyway, so we threw that one out. We came up with another one. And it was fine, but yeah, and then as we went to the UK, we did a show in Manchester and in London, and just kept on refining and refining and refining. And then we went to Toronto, and now we're here on Broadway. And I think we always talked about the idea of this being a Broadway show, but I have this ongoing joke with my friends where it's like I never knew it was going to be a big deal until it was a big deal, and so that's like now, you know. And so yeah, I'm just sort of like slowly taking it in. Like I've done other Broadway shows. For some reason, this one, I mean, In the Heights was so important because I was a kid then. It was like the first thing I ever did, and we had no idea what we were doing. It was just like, let's make something cool that is new, right?
Yeah.
And so then I worked on the Hamilton record, but I haven't really done many other theater things. And then this came up, and it was like, I can't say no to this. So I'm going to go all out. Like I'm going to go as far as I can in every direction with this. And I feel like I think we did it some justice. I think the tunes really speak for themselves, and I think the way we put them together in the show really speaks for itself too. We were talking prior to sitting here about like what's great about & Juliet, and I think the key is it makes you happy. Like we need a world with happiness and joy. And if you want happiness and joy, come see & Juliet. It's almost impossible to not enjoy it. And I feel
When you were creating these presentations for Max Martin, did you hire singers, pop singers, or Broadway savvy?
We actually hired Broadway savvy singers. I just hired my friends, so Derek Baskin and James Monroe Iglehart from Aladdin, and just a couple friends just to come in for a few days and sing some songs. And it was really great because it was sort of like, what did their voices sound like on pop songs? I was trying to sort of make Max understand like what it was going to sound like. Because also, I think with his pop music, it's only the star singing the song. So in Juliet, for example, like the ensemble is there, and like sometimes a line sung by a woman is then sung by a man and vice versa, or whatever it is, and the voices are changing, and some people, you know, Broadway theater voices are known to be having like this bravado and vibrato and all these things that sort of Max isn't very used to. So there was a bit of like a learning curve for both of us to sort of figure out how this was going to sound with these type of voices and in this type of environment.
And once you cast Broadway savvy singers, or even an opera singer like Paolo Schott, did you have to actually teach them how to sing the Max Martin catalog?
I think yes and no. I think the great part about our cast is they all have their own idiosyncrasies and their own things. So Paolo, for example, has like the biggest voice I've ever heard in my life. And he warms up every night before the show and he just sings opera, like full on, like whatever. I don't even know, I don't follow opera, but I can hear it. And he just, like full voice, and it's like the paint starts to melt off the walls. It's like so loud and so big, and his voice is so amazing. And when we were in the recording studio recording the & Juliet cast album, he did like 2 takes of it, of whatever song he was singing, Shape of My Heart, because his voice is just so amazing. It's just humongous. And so anyway, when we were applying it to the show, it was just like, how can we use your strengths and how can we make what you're doing, particularly for that role, because Paolo is not necessarily known as a comedian, but his role in & Juliet is very much a comedic role. And so it was always like, well, how can we use like his big voice to sort of play against it, or use his big voice to sing like this really ridiculous pop song, but like in some ways it totally works.
You make me feel like I'm living a teenage dream. The way you tug me on, I can't sleep. Let's run away and don't ever look back. Don't ever look back.
And because he totally bought into it from the beginning. He was like, I will do what you like. I'm not going to bring my whatever to this. He's like, you know, let me be, you know, let you guide me and figure out how to do this, which is really like an incredible thing for an actor to say and do, and it was a wonderful experience.
The traditional rule in Broadway musical theater is that a song must advance the character, the evolution of the character, advance the story. Interestingly enough, this does it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of miraculous because it really shouldn't, but it does. Why, again, how did you manage to do that?
That I still don't fully understand how we did that. I do know that as we were coming to Broadway, we were still even trying to refine that idea even more. So you'll find that there is no, in & Juliet, there's no full song. We never sing an entire song from front to back. And the point of that was, you know, most choruses and things are repetitive in pop music. And so the goal was to not be repetitive. And to do the golden rule of Broadway musical theater is every lyric and everything has to move the narrative forward. And so, yeah. And so I think the way we did it is we cut. Like we started to just like take away verses that were repetitive and sort of mush things together, like get to the bridge sooner or put a chorus in where it wasn't necessarily, because that helped us, you know, push the narrative along. Just like little tricks and things like that. Or sometimes we would just like make a mashup of things. So like if we were trying to get two feelings, like my favorite example of that is in Act 2, it's Problem and I Can't Feel My Face. Problem by Ariana Grande, and Juliet sings it, and I Can't Feel My Face by The Weeknd, and Romeo sings it, and we sort of mush them together. And so you're sort of seeing both sides of this particular, of where both the characters are at, and yet it seems to work for both of them. Miraculously, I don't know. I think we must attribute that to David West Reed and just the way he sculpted this whole thing is just nothing short of brilliant in my book.
There's two sort of things, I suppose, that apply, and one is there's not often strings in pop songs,
right.
In the Max Martin catalog. I think you use strings here to give it a more Broadway sound. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I think when we were doing this, it was always, how can we turn this into a score? Like, how can we make this a cohesive thing, musically speaking, because all of these songs are so different and weird, and weird's not the right word, are also, my kids use weird as like an overarch, anyway, are also different and awesome. In my head, I was like, the strings will be the thing, the glue that sort of mushes all the music together and sort of makes it all make sense, I think.
I'm not a girl, not yet a woman. All I need is time, a moment that is mine, while I'm in between. I'm not a girl.
And yes, that it's a Broadway thing, but also yes, that it's just like, it's also an Elizabethan sort of Renaissance thing, and I feel like that like sort of nod to Shakespeare is okay, right? And like, and it's the only, you know, it's the only thing that is always playing all the time.
How did you play with tempos in order to create either tone, mood, advance a character's arc?
It's so funny you say that. I was making breakfast this morning, and on Alexa came one of the boy band songs. I don't even remember which one it was. And I was sitting there, and I was drinking coffee or whatever I was doing, and I was like, oh my God, this is so slow. Like, so I realized how much we messed with the tempos. And Max and I have been talking about it for years. He's like, I always do things too slow. I don't know why. It's just sort of where it is. And like, but then if you make it faster, it also works. So for us, so like for example, Hit Me Baby One More Time, right?
Right.
Which is like the second song in the show. It's always the big, or the third song of the show, but like the big ingenue song, right? And it's known as like this, you know, Britney Spears, up-tempo, sexy, whatever. And we sort of just like turned it into a ballad and like made it her I Want song.
Supposed to know that something wasn't right here.
And for some reason, again, I don't know, magically, it seems to work. I don't, you know. But yeah, that's that one we slowed down, and then like the song that's a few after that is called "Show Me Love."
Take me around the world, now show me love, show me life, baby, show me what it's all about.
It's a great song, but it's like a medium tempo sort of bop, and we turned it into like more of an up tempo thing.
Now show me love, show me love, show me life, baby, show me what it's all about.
I think tempo a lot in this show particularly is just about the mood of it all. And so and also Max doesn't write a lot of ballads. Yeah. So we needed to have ballads and slower songs in the show. So the only way to do that was to slow them down and see if they worked. And we did that with a couple other things just to see like, what is the slow version, the ballad version of X song? And it doesn't work all the time. So, but with Hit Me Baby, there was just like a way that this sort of like plodding heartbeat vibe of her and like what Juliet is all about really worked with the slow down version of that song.
Is there such a thing that you can define as a Broadway sound? And I realize that it's evolved from the days of Rodgers and Hammerstein. But if you go to Rodgers and Hammerstein, what was the Broadway sound then? And then what was the Broadway sound that you knew you could play with now?
I feel like there's a lot of different Broadway sounds, which I think is a thing I'm really proud of, and like to be part of that, you know? I think the Rodgers and Hammerstein sound is like that big orchestral sort of, you know, thing where there's 29 people in the pit and there's a whole thing, but then it's like the songs are like sort of a little more vaudevillian, more of like the like that sort of thing, which we use on Sesame Street all the time, you know? And then, you know, but for myself, like growing up, like the first musical I saw was Rent. And so like that to me was the archetype for what I was into. I mean, I wore out that CD in those days. And it was the first thing I ever saw. I sat in the absolute last row. I saw the original cast. I had no idea what I was looking at or what I was seeing, but I was like, this is really hip and really cool. I grew up on Long Island. My parents brought me in to see shows, and I also saw Nathan Lane and Peter Gallagher and Guys and Dolls, which was amazing. But yeah, Lin-Manuel Miranda and I met in college, and he was definitely the one who sort of hit me to musical theater. I wasn't a musical theater person in high school. I played music in the pits, but I wasn't like a theater person at all. And so Lin, like he made me music direct his shows in college and then thereafter, and then we were roommates for a really long time, and he would play soundtracks. So like Sweeney Todd and Into the Woods and Tick Tick Boom and, you know, even things we've worked on, which is crazy to me. But just he sort of gave me like a crash course in both like reggaeton, hip hop, and musical theater music, which was great. And that's like sort of what we did all day was we just listened to music. And so what we did with Juliet was sort of taking, I guess sort of taking the sound of Rent and the sound of those things and then the sound of Rodgers and Hammerstein and sort of mushing them together. I feel like the jukebox musical per se is sort of, I think, a tough term to maybe apply to this. To me, Juliet's more of just like a, I don't know, like a cauldron of music, right? It's just like there's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you mix it all together and it comes out as this thing, and it seems to be working so far.
It's working and working beautifully. The thing about Rent is that they made a concerted effort to have a street sound from there. They didn't want Broadway sounding actors for Rent. They made a concerted effort not to cast that. Did you feel that you had to bring a certain rawness of the pop world to the singers either in The Heights or in & Juliet?
With Juliet, we went after voices that were very specific and very like big and grandiose. And I think, you know, our cast is a really interesting hodgepodge of actors and ages and people, and that's kind of what I love about it. But particularly voice-wise, like Betsy Wolfe is known for, like, she does some opera things. She was in Waitress, but she has this humongous voice and she just sings the paint off the walls. And the same thing with Lorna Courtney. She's this unbelievable talent to just, like, they sing unbelievably, right? And then to round it out, like a guy like Stark, who was like in the Green Day musical and had just come off doing the Avett Brothers musical, and he sort of just came in and he had it, and he had that voice, and, you know, it all worked out. And I think the hardest thing to do with these songs is to sort of figure out how they all sit together when they're all singing together. I think that's kind of the key with our show is you really have to listen to the parts to make them all sort of come together.
Juliet, your father and I are sending you to a nunnery. There's nowhere to run. You have no place to go. Surrender your heart, body and soul. How could it be you're asking me to feel the things you never show?
We have a very short time left, but what's your favorite moment in the show?
Oh man, there's so many good ones. I've been getting teary-eyed lately. Am I allowed to? Effin' Perfect at the end of our show is a total surprise song that my dear friend Mel LeBarry sings, and even to this day, I've seen her do it like 1,000 times, and it kills me every time. And then the way that sort of dovetails into Roar, and just to watch, I think my favorite part at this point is watching people watch the show, because I think, like we were talking about, I don't think there's so much joy. And I think that that's a really exciting thing to do in theater, and I don't think you get to see or feel that as much as you should, and this is a wonderful opportunity to do so.
Well, your work on the show, Bill Sherman, is effing perfect.
I will take that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. We look forward to bringing you more fascinating conversations with artists and thought leaders as New York Theater The Fabulous Invalid regains its invaluable place in American culture. I'm Patrick Pacheco.